All right, we are back, and if you're joining us on YouTube, welcome to the show, because I always cut out the beginning part. And of course, if you want to listen to the full episode, just check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. JD, are you ready to jump into this full review here?
I am. I've got my butt in the DeLorean of my own podcasting seat, dude. Let's do this. Let's get into BTTF2.
Here we go. So we pick up where we left off in part 1. It's Saturday, October 26, 1985. Marty opens up the garage door to reveal his new truck, and we have our first shot of our new Jennifer. Of course, as we talked about earlier in the episode, the original Jennifer Parker was Claudia Wells, who was replaced in part 2 by Elisabeth Shue. And again, no offense, but I couldn't tell the difference. Doc appears in the DeLorean and he knocks out some trash cans and runs over a few things, and Doc tells him that they have to go back to the future. Marty wants to know if it's because they become assholes in the future, and Doc's like, no, I can't tell you too much. Just get in the car. So they take off in the DeLorean as Biff comes running out to show Marty his new matchbooks. They're for his auto detailing business, and he sees them take off in the sky, and he's like, what the heck's going on here? JD, I always love this version of Biff because he's such a wimp now. He comes out, he's like, hey Marty, you want to check out my new matchbooks? Like, what do you think of him here?
It sets up and sets the tone really great for who Biff is, where Biff goes, where Biff came from, and everything that we've experienced from the first movie. So from like a writing standpoint, it's a great juxtaposition between everything that we know Biff to be, and it pulls the rug out and says, here's new Biff.
We cut to the opening credit shot here, which is basically a POV shot up in the clouds. If you're nitpicking, this doesn't play real well in 2019. What did you think of this opening scene of them just kind of like going left and right throughout these clouds here?
Oh, I hated it.
Yeah.
I thought it was horrible.
I was like, God, this is awful.
I couldn't believe it. It has been so long since I've seen this movie that I was like, wait, did I put in the wrong DVD?
If I was showing somebody this movie for the first time, I'd be like, no, you don't understand. It's fucking amazing. Let's get through this shitty scene. Just grab something to drink. Come back in 1 minute. Like, this is not the movie. I swear to God, it gets better.
And what year are we in right now? The movie came out in
89. They probably filmed it in 88.
So you have to think this was a fantastic idea in 1988.
Oh yeah, and you're watching this in 89 just going, I can't believe they shot up in the clouds, man. This is just awesome.
I'm happy that you're apparently watching this movie in Alabama.
Hey, Indiana, we've got Hicks in Indiana. Come on.
Indiana, Alabama. Come on, mama.
I'm going to keep chewing this candy, man. I got 4 teeth. Dadgum. So we cut to the DeLorean driving through some serious traffic here in the future. Doc explains that they are descending towards Hill Valley on October 21st, 2015. And Marty's like, 2015? We're in the future. And Marty tells Jennifer he doesn't know how to explain this, but we're in the future now. Jennifer starts asking a bunch of questions, and Doc is getting very nervous and just keeps looking at her. And eventually, he lives by his own motto that no one should know too much about their own future. And he pulls out this Men in Black device and just puts her right to sleep. And then they arrive in the pouring rain. And Marty's like, Doc, it's raining. I'm not getting out. And Doc's like, oh, yeah. Wait 5 more seconds. And then the rain completely stops. And Marty steps out into 2015. JD, just seeing 2015 for the first time, they've got this beautiful set. What'd you think?
I liked the set design. It was a great transition from shitty clouds to what was 30 years into the future from where we picked up in 1985. Yeah. And it depressed the hell out of me to be like, man, that was 4 years ago.
And kudos to the set design guys. This took 2 years to build this set. So I thought they did a great job.
A lot of it was pretty accurate to, I think, what Hill Valley would look like 30 years into the future. A lot of it they missed the mark completely on.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that as we go. We've got to talk about the Nike self-lacing shoes, man. Those are awesome, are they not?
Well, yeah, I guess they're just would be Crocs now or Canucks.
I guess you would. I don't know what you would compare them to, but I wish the packaging had gotten a little bit better over the years, but it's still the same old crappy cardboard box. And they had them in Doc has them in this awesome black tube with a Nike sign on them. And
yeah, what's with that tube that he just has? He's like, here's some awesome sports clothes and apparel.
Yeah.
The thing was awesome.
And what he does here is he instructs Marty to go over the Cafe 80s, and he tells him to order a Pepsi and gives him a $50 bill for a Pepsi. Thank God Pepsi's only $2. You can go to any restaurant, and for $2 to $3 you can still get a Pepsi. It's not $50.
Yeah, but it used to be a dime.
I know.
So inflation, they definitely predicted inflation. They were just overinflated.
A little bit overinflated, including the... So we get to the clock tower, which, by the way, if you want to see something kind of cool with this scene, the ledge on the clock tower, still broken from when Doc messes it up in 1985. I thought that was a nice touch. There's an advertisement for Jaws 19 in 3D Holomax. And this shark comes out and eats Marty, and then it goes away, and then Marty goes, still looks fake. Which I thought was hilarious. But here's where their inflation really kicks in. We have a commercial for Mayor Goldie Wilson III. And he's advertising a car for $31,999,995. $32 million for a car.
Yeah, they missed the mark on that.
Whoops. 32,000, you would have been just fine. Too many nines. So we go inside Cafe 80s. There's no waiters. It's just touchscreen. Honestly, I feel like we're not far from this right now. In fact, my McDonald's locally here, they have self-ordering screens now inside. So if you don't want to go in the lines, you just go type in what you want, grab your little table ticket, and you go sit down.
I love those so much.
Yeah. So we're not far from that. They're pretty much on par there. And then we've got Michael Jackson on the screen explaining the menu. That hasn't aged well. And then Marty orders a Pepsi, and we see old man Biff, and he tells Marty that it must be tough being married to a real butthead. And he taps Marty on the head with his cane, and Marty's like, God, stop it. And he tells Marty that the old man flushed his entire future down the drain, and he thinks Marty's like, what are you talking about? My father, George? He's like, no, your father, Marty. He doesn't realize that he's Martin in this situation. So anyway, we see Griff enter, and he tells Grandpa that he wanted 2 coats of wax, and then he takes him out to the car to put wax on. The guy can barely walk, which cracked me up. And then on his way out, Biff says, say hello to your grandma for me. He's still getting that joke over. And then the last part of this scene we got to talk about here is these 2 kids playing wild gunmen. And one of the kids here is Elijah Wood. How funny is it to see Elijah Wood here?
I did not realize that was Elijah Wood.
Watching it back, obviously he doesn't do a lot of acting here, but it's cool to see he's got this little bit role, and then he's going to later turn out movies like Radio Flyer and become a pretty successful adult actor, which is not easy to do for kid actors. So any final thoughts on here before we move off of this scene?
No, it's really neat to see him sort of interjected the same way that Billy Zane was just a part of the first Back to the Future way before he was an icon that he is.
We've got our first clip here. Let's take a listen from the cafe scene here with Martin and Griff.
Pepsi, perfect. Damn, Pepsi. Hey, McFly! I thought I told you to stay in here.
Griff, guys, how's it going?
McFly!
Yeah?
McFly!
What?
Your shoes are built. So, McFly, have you made a decision about tonight's opportunity?
Yeah, Griff, I was thinking about it. I'm not sure because I just think, it might be a little bit dangerous. So.
What's wrong, McFly? You got no scrope?
It's a complete limp. What's it gonna be, McFly? Are you in or out?
I'm not sure that I should, because I think that I should discuss it with my father.
Your father! Wrong answer, McFly!
Okay, Griff. I'll do it, buddy, whatever you say.
Stay down and shut up. Keep pedaling, you two!
JD, what do you think of this scene?
I love the way that this scene is presented and set up, and the way that everything about this cafe is so futuristic to the point where it almost feels like a video game itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can see that.
I feel like we're in River City Ransom, and these are our first stage end bosses.
Yeah, the one thing that I find interesting about this is they portray Martin as this real wimpy kid. And of course, Marty's like the guy you can't call chicken. He's like Mr. Tough Guy. And he barely manages to get out of the cafe here. And he goes outside, he grabs a hoverboard from this little girl. JD, man, hoverboards were the talk of this movie, it seemed like, in a lot of ways. What'd you think of the hoverboard idea?
It directly mirrors the first movie, does it not?
Yeah,
with the
skateboard.
skateboards from the whatever the hell those kids were push carting.
Yeah, now they're push carting a hoverboard, but it's in the air.
Which I think is so cool. Like,
yeah.
To set up this again, and this is going to be a reoccurring theme in this movie, is to create that foil between the second film and the first film, and realizing that these two films aren't a replicate of one another, but a composite story that continues from part one to part two, that you can't have 1955 without 2015, and you can't have a hoverboard without push carts. Like, it's just, I love it. And we get into this way in depth with Weissman. I don't know. It's neat. It's unique, especially at the time. I think, Avengers Endgame did a great job of stealing a lot from this film and this franchise, but at the same time, here's the original. This is the granddaddy of that recycled footage.
Well, Marty manages to maneuver away from Biff's goons here, a lot like in the first film. He's able to grab a hold of the back of a Jeep, and he kind of propels himself into this pond in front of the courthouse, and the goons are like, "Hey, McFly, hoverboards don't work on water unless you've got power." So Griff walks to the back of his car and pulls out this powered hoverboard, and they all latch on with some cables, and Griff's like, "Better up!" And he's about to take out Marty here when Marty just dives into the water, just using common sense. And Griff goes crashing into the courthouse and right through the glass windows, and then Marty gets out, kind of shakes himself out, and his clothes turn on an automated drying system. Very cool idea. And then a guy comes over, he's like, "Hey man, save the clock tower. Give me $100, kid, will you?" And I'm like, $100? God dang it, there, inflation. And then Marty sees a commercial advertising that the Cubs win the World Series against Miami. And this is interesting because Marty makes a comment. He's like, "Wow, I can't believe that." And the guy's like, "Yeah, man, the Cubbies. I wish I'd put some money on them." He's like, "No, Miami." Of course, Miami was not a team then. They are now. Miami Marlins, owned by Derek Jeter, actually, one of the owners. So that's come to fruition. That's a real thing. The Cubs, unfortunately, did not win in 2015, but they did win in 2016. And this is just a cool scene here. And then he's going to get into the almanac next and buy that from the store. What do you think of all this, JD?
I love the way that they sort of accidentally predicted almost to the year the Cubbies winning. Miami, like the baseball squad. It's just, they took risks in defining the mythology here, and it surprisingly paid off, like, really, really well.
Now, old man Biff sees the flying DeLorean in the next shot, and he's like, wow, I haven't seen one of those in 30 years. And he's really suspicious as he looks at Marty and Doc, and then he turns around to hear the young Martin coming out of Cafe 80s, avoiding traffic. He's like, hey, I'm walking here. And then Biff says, two of them? Doc and Marty see the cops next, and they are about to pick up Jennifer in the alley here. And Doc's like, what in the name of Sir Isaac H. Newton is happening? Great Scott. So he looks at the newspaper, and it's turned from his son Griff going to jail. Or sorry, it's turned from Martin going to jail to now Griff going to jail. And Doc says future history has now been altered. That wasn't the plan, but nevertheless, let's get Jennifer and get out of here. But meanwhile, she's being loaded into the cop car, and she drives off, and they're going to have to give chase here to follow her back to the house. JD, this is a lot to unpack here. Jennifer's just doing a lot of sleeping in this movie, which I think is the issue when you write a movie and you don't ever plan for a sequel, because they have to include her in all this stuff, so they just decided to knock her out and put her to sleep. Do you feel like from a writing standpoint, there's a better way to involve her than they did? What do you think?
I feel like there's a more appropriate way that they could have included her in a dynamic fashion, but at the same time, they sort of establish who she is through dynamic irony, in dramatic fashion, that she has no control over what she's doing, but she's a character that sways the action of the film through being knocked out.
That's a good point. That's why you're here. I like it. In this scene here, before we cut to Jennifer's future house, Marty gets lectured by Doc for buying the almanac for financial gain. That's not what he designed the time machine for. So he throws it in the trash. Meanwhile, old man Biff picks up the almanac and then overhears the entire conversation of Doc saying that he didn't invent the time machine for personal gain, and he sees Marty and Doc talking together. So he knows the cat's out of the bag here. So we cut to Marty in Jennifer's future house. The cops arrive and they say, Hilldale. Nothing here but a breeding ground for tramps, lobos, and zipheads. They tell Jennifer to be careful in the future. And she finally comes home and realizes that she's in the future here. She's looking at wedding photos of her and Marty, and she's like really embarrassed of where they got married. And it looks like Marty's wearing a pair of jeans. Clearly, they didn't have a lot of money when they got married. And then the doorbell rings, and Marty and Jennifer's daughter comes running down the stairs. Of course, this is Michael J. Fox in a wig. Not real attractive here, would you say, JD?
Oh, no.
No. Horrible.
That's a sight.
Not what you want to see. Michael J. Fox in drag. No good. No good. The doorbell rings, and it's Grandma Lorraine and Grandpa George. JD, it's our first shot of our new buddy, Jeffrey Weissman. What did you think of him here, hanging upside down as he comes in? He's like, I threw my back out on the golf course.
Was not expecting that at all. I like the way that they literally turn the tables upside down.
Yeah.
And bring him in toes to head.
Yeah, they sure do. So we cut to Marty and Doc. Doc mentions that he thought he saw a taxi following them in the rearview mirror, and he's like, weird. Marty and Doc and Einstein exit the DeLorean, and he tells Marty to stay here because he can't risk him running into his future self. Of course, the taxi arrives with old man Biff, and he gets out, and the bill for this little taxi, $175. Not cheap. And I didn't see him tip either. Little cheap bastard. We hear Lorraine going on and on about how Marty ruined his future by racing that guy that called him a chicken and ruined his music career. And then finally, future Marty, 2015 Marty, arrives home, and he's an old man now. Jennifer watches him come in from the closet, and then we cut outside, and Marty decides he can't wait anymore, so he leaves the DeLorean and ventures off into the neighborhood, giving Biff the opportunity to get into the DeLorean and take off without Marty or Doc knowing about it. JD, what do you think of the scene so far?
He's a little clever cat, is he not? Sneaking into the DeLorean and not having any necessary conception about what the concept of time is to the present.
Right.
Because essentially you can escape to the past and return to that current future without a blink of an eye.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, he's for an old man that can barely walk and has a cane, he gets around. Biff is doing the thing. So we cut back inside and Lorraine is biting into this tiny foil wrapper Pizza Hut pizza. And she puts it in the hydrator oven and it says level 14. And it takes about 5 seconds and the pizza comes out hot and ready. And then we're going to cut to a scene here and listen to another clip as Marty gets a call from Needles. Let's listen in here.
Hey, the Big M. How's it hanging, McFly?
Hey, Needles.
So,
Needles?
did you take a look at that little business proposal of mine?
I don't know, Needles.
What are you afraid of? If this thing works, it'll solve all your financial problems.
And if it doesn't work, Needles, I could get fired. It's illegal. I mean, what if the Jits is monitoring, huh?
The Jits will never find out.
Oh,
Come on. Stick your card in the slot and I'll handle it. Unless you want everyone in division to think you're chicken.
Nobody calls me Chicken, Needles. Nobody.
All right. Prove it.
All right, Needles. Here's my card. Scan it. I'm in.
Thanks, McFly. I'll see you at the plant tomorrow.
Thank you for using AT&T.
McFly!
Fujitsu-san, konnichiwa.
McFly! I was monitoring that scan you just interfaced. You are terminated!
Terminated? No! It wasn't my fault, sir! It was Needles! Needles was behind the
And
whole
you
thing!
cooperated!
No, I didn't! It was a
illegal.
sting
And
operation!
you
I
knew.
was setting them up!
Read my
No!
facts!
Please, no, I cannot be fired! I'm fired!
JD, I love this scene, especially the end of it. McFry! What'd you think?
Needles is familiar, is he not? Am I mistaken to say that that's Flea, right?
That sure is. Flea
That
from what band is he in again?
Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Red Hot, yeah, that's right. Awesome bass player.
I was watching that. Oh yeah, obviously you guys are kindred spirits.
Yeah, I do slap at the bass. Well, at least I used to.
Man.
You know what's funny? I haven't played my bass guitar in years. Before we got on the call, my son literally dragged it into my office and he asked what it was. He thought my grandpa was buried in there for some reason because it's a big case. And he's I don't know why. But I opened it up.
Creepy.
Yeah, and this bass, which Seafoam Green, Mark Hoppus, Blink-182, Fender, jazz bass, love it. Spent an entire summer saving up for that bad boy. And it is pristine. Can see your reflection in it. So anyway, continue on with Flea.
No, it was just fantastic to see him in this part, and I was kind of like, hey, wait a moment. That man looks familiar. And then, like you said, to switch it and to get the McFly.
I love it. I also love the fact that they thought a fax machine would still be a big thing in 2015 as he gets the "you're fired" fax. And then we see a knock on the window here, and it's Doc. He tells Jennifer to just walk out the front door. And as she goes to leave, she walks into her future self, and they both scream, "I'm old and I'm young" at the same time. And then they pass out, and Doc yells for Marty to come quick, and then they grab Jennifer, who is now passed out again. Meanwhile, Biff has arrived back in the DeLorean, but on his way out, he breaks off part of his cane and leaves it on the floorboard of the car. Doc says that when he returns to 1985, he's going to destroy this time machine, and he's going to explore the second greatest mystery of the universe: women. So they arrive back in 1985, and they drop Jennifer off on the porch swing. Doc says that when she wakes up, we'll have to convince her that it was all a dream. And as they're leaving, Marty says, man, I don't remember there being bars on these windows. So they arrive back at Marty's childhood home, and the sign for Lion Estates has graffiti all over it. It looks really run down, but they don't seem to notice. Marty goes to get in through the fence door here, but it's got a lock on it, so he's got to jump it, and he slides into the bedroom where there's a young girl sleeping in there, and she screams, and the dad comes after him, chases him with a baseball bat, and this guy is so Samuel L. Jackson. I wish it was Samuel L. Jackson. It's not, but what do you think of this scene?
Dude is crazy, and he is ready to kill for his family. He swings for the fences. Like, I wonder if somebody appeared in my home, if I would have the gumption to swing a baseball bat and just ruin everything the same way this guy does. He kills everything off of the dresser, off of above the bed, the window. Like, he just has no mercy.
Yeah, and looking at this guy, just wanted to see who it was. The actor's name is Al White, and he's been in a little bit of everything, but probably another future episode because he was the second jive dude in the movie Airplane. So I gotta imagine at some point we're gonna do Airplane.
Oh, we have to do Airplane. We have to. We've already done one Leslie Nielsen movie in our archive, Prom Night.
He's not funny in that movie. Don't watch it for comedy. You've been warned. Now, we cut to Hill Valley, and it's definitely in rough shape here. Marty's on his way to the doc's house. He's trying to figure everything out, and he winds up on a porch, and he looks to read the date on the paper because he just thinks he's in the wrong year, and he ends up on Principal Strickland's porch. And Strickland says he doesn't know him, but I can tell you this, you look like a slacker. And then a car drives by and shoots up Strickland's house. And then Marty, as the car drives off, Strickland fires at him and he just yells slackers, which made me laugh for some reason. You slackers! Just shooting at him. And then Marty ends up at Biff's Giant Casino Hotel. We know, of course, this is a play on Donald Trump in the 80s. You know, Trump didn't quite destroy the country like this. There's no tankers rolling down the street shooting things up. But it's interesting that that's what they thought would happen. And here we are in 2019 and he's the president. Another good prediction.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's listen to the Biff documentary because we're going to get a lot of info on how he made his fortune here.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Biff Tannen Museum, dedicated to Hill Valley's #1 citizen and America's greatest living folk hero, the one and only Biff Tannen. Of course, we've all heard the legend, but who is the man? Inside, you will learn how Biff Tannen became one of the richest and most powerful men in America. Learn the amazing history of the Tannen family, starting with his great-grandfather, Buford Mad Dog Tannen, fastest gun in the West. See Biff's humble beginnings and how a trip to the racetrack on his 21st birthday made him a millionaire overnight. Share in the excitement of a fabulous winning streak that earned him the nickname, the luckiest man on earth. Learn how Biff parlayed that lucky winning streak into the vast empire called Biffco. Discover how in 1979 Biff successfully lobbied to legalize gambling and turned Hill Valley's dilapidated courthouse into a beautiful casino hotel.
I just want to say one thing. God bless America.
Meet the women who shared in his passion as he searched for true love. And relive Biff's happiest moment as in 1973 he realized his lifelong romantic dream by marrying his high school sweetheart, Lorraine Baines McFly.
Third time's a charm.
JD, what'd you think of this clip?
It's a little self-serving in a lot of ways because we've seen some of it and we know what to expect.
Yeah, I felt like this was just kind of let's fill in the gaps real quick.
Right. And it's, I don't want to call it lazy, but at the same time, it's sort of like exposition for the sake of exposition.
Yeah. So we're going to cut to Marty getting jumped by these guys here and knocked out after watching the documentary. And he wakes up as he usually does in these movies. And he's like, Mom, is that you? She's like, yes, Marty, you've been asleep for 2 hours. But don't worry, you're safe and sound here on the good old 27th floor. And then Marty's like, 27th floor? What? You're so big. And her chest is clearly had some work done to it here. And then Biff comes charging in, calls him a little son of a bitch, and says that I thought you were going to be in Switzerland at boarding school. So I love that Biff took over as like his father here and sent him to Switzerland.
Right, yeah. So that's a great man.
That's a great bit here. I love that. I feel like that doesn't get enough laugh out of that. But so Biff says, look at him. He's a butthead, just like his old man. Lorraine tells him that he's not even half the man that George was. And then Biff pushes her down. And then Marty tries to charge at him, but the goons hold him back. And Biff gets a good slug to the gut in on him. And Lorraine says that she's leaving. But when Biff threatens to cut off her and her kids, she comes running back. He even throws in a reference to Uncle Jailbird Joey. JD, what'd you think of this scene?
I love that it includes Jailbird Joey.
It's so nice.
And that's what's so cool about this movie is it's a boomerang for a lot of things that were already touched on.
Ooh.
And it's not just rehashing them, but it's bringing them back.
Yeah, I'm not just saying this because you're my podcasting partner here, but Boomerang, that was well done, man.
Thank you.
Pat on the back. Okay, so we arrive at the cemetery next, and he finds out that George died on March 15th, 1973. They're at Doc's lab here. Now, I never noticed this until today, watching this back. His lab is a total mess, and it has no electricity. Everything's being lit by candles. Did you ever notice that?
I did not. No. Interesting. Yeah. I did not pick up on that.
Because we know in part one, of course, Marty, hits the guitar and he blows out all the speakers, but that doesn't knock out the electric. So in the alternate 1985, Doc's place is completely just run down. And as we find out, we're going to find out why here in a few minutes, because they start looking at newspaper clippings here, and George was shot dead, and Doc explains what happened. And then he kind of draws out a line and says that prior to this time, in 1985, we skewed off to a different version of 1985. And Doc says he knows what happened, and he pulls out the bag that would have had the almanac in it, but it's just empty now. And then he pulls out the cane from Biff. And Doc says that when we were in the future, Biff went back in time and gave his younger self the sports almanac, and that's how he made his fortune. And then Doc shows Marty an article of himself, and he's being committed into an insane asylum here. So that's why his house is all run down, is because 1985 Doc version 1 is a nutcase. Or a version 2, I should say. The alternate Doc. So, JD, a lot to unpack here. There's a lot. There's timelines. There's two characters. There's newspapers. What do you think of this scene?
Yeah, you bring up a great point, because we are getting into that divergent timeline setup of what is going on, what's possible, what is the past equal, and what is the culmination of the future. And it's kind of mind-boggling in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And this film does a great job of jumping from 85, 55, 2015. And the one thing that we haven't really discussed yet is there's been a lot of setup for the third movie as well.
Yeah, well, that's actually the scene coming up here, because as we enter into Biff's casino again, he's watching a Western with Clint Eastwood on there, and he gets shot in the chest, and he's got a shield under it, and then Biff is like, bulletproof vest, the guy's brilliant. And then Marty comes in, and Biff, who's in the hot tub with these two hot chicks, he's like, we gotta discuss something here. The Gray's Sports Almanac. He's like, okay, you heard him, girls. Get out of here. Party's over. And they go into his little office area, and Biff tells him that he got that on November 12th, 1955. And Marty says, that's the day of the famous Hill Valley lightning strike. And Biff's like, good memory. Wow, way to know your history. Now let's listen to the rest of this scene here as we get a lot more information.
I'll never forget that Saturday. I just picked my car up from the shop because I'd rolled it in a drag race a few days earlier.
I thought you crashed into a manure truck.
How do you know about that?
My father told me about it
Your father?
before he died.
Oh, yeah, right. So there I was, minding my own business. This crazy old codger with a cane shows up. He says he's my distant relative. I don't see any resemblance. So he says, how would you like to be rich? So I said, sure. So he lays this book on me. He says, this book will tell me the outcome of every sporting event till the end of the century. All I have to do is bet on the winner, and I'll never lose. So I said, what's the catch? He says, no catch. Just keep it a secret. After that, he disappeared. I never saw him again. Oh, and he told me one more thing. He said someday a crazy, wild-eyed scientist or a kid may show up asking about that book. And if that ever happens... It's funny. I never thought it would be you.
Yeah, well, Biff, you're forgetting one thing. What the hell is that?
JD, what do you think of this?
I love the way that we play off the past and the present and the future here, right? Like it's really kind of cool and unique, and we get to see Marty as being sort of a lightning rod of information, but at the same time he's experienced and he's been to the past and to the present and to the future. Like he's gone through so much that Biff can't necessarily keep up with him in terms of experience initially, but he knows better.
Yeah. Well, he kind of flips it on its head here because he, right at the end of the scene, he's like, he just turns to him and goes, and yeah, by the way, the old man told me that one day this crazy science guy or some kid would come in here asking questions. He's like, I just never thought it was you. And then he cocks the gun at him. And then Marty's like, hey, Biff, look. And then whips the golden tray at him and just takes off. And he's got to flee from Biff. And he's literally trying to kill him now. You know, usually he's just calling him a butthead. Now he's trying to shoot him. And they get to the top of the roof where it looks like Marty's got no options and he's going to have to jump. So Biff's like, do it. Just end it. And then Marty just drops off the ledge, but Doc Brown is waiting for him with the time machine. And Biff looks down and all he can do is just watch as they get into the DeLorean, and Marty tells Doc that they've got to go back to 1955, and Doc's like, I don't believe it. So they speed to 88, punch in November 12th, 1955, and they're going to go back in time here. But one thing, and this is another nod to the part 3, is the time circuit board kind of shorts out here a little bit. And instead of 1985, it goes to 1885, which of course is going to happen in part 3. So JD, what do you think of this scene?
Yeah, it's fantastic the way to see Marty just jumping and, you know, realizing that a hero has more than just brawn, but brains is a big part of that. So it's cool to see him outsmart Biff, bronze, brains, Biff, Battlestar Galactica.
I love it. So they arrive back at 1955, and Doc says there are now 2 of me here and 2 of you. Doc is running from literally like one end of the road to the other. I love this because Marty keeps trying to chase after him. And then he pulls out a briefcase here of money from all these different time periods. And we cut to the outside of Biff's house, and we find out that Biff lives with Grandma. He steals a ball as he leaves the house from these neighborhood kids. And just being the awesome bully that he is, he's like, you want it? Go get it. And he throws it all the way up into the neighbor's like little like landing spot at the house. Mr. Sandman starts playing in the background here. JD, can you remember what song Mr. Sandman was featured in a previous episode in our archives?
Well, we have not done Jeepers Creepers yet.
Right. Very true.
Mr. Sandman, bring me a treat. Da, da, da. Obviously, it was in Back to the Future Part 1.
Halloween? I'm not sure about Back to the Future 1. It might be in Back to the Future 1, but it's in Halloween, and it's also in Uncle Buck. Biff finds out that his car that he drove into the manure truck in Back to the Future Part 1 is going to cost him $300 to fix. So he's a little mad about that. He's going on. And then across the street, we see Lorraine is picking out her prom dress. So Biff runs over and he's like, looky what we have here. And he starts like grabbing on her and they're going back and forth. And eventually he tells her that one day she's going to be his girl. Marty is watching the whole thing from the back of Biff's car. And Lorraine tells Biff that she's going to the dance with Calvin Klein. Of course, that's Marty. And then Biff goes to get back into his car with Marty ducked down behind the back seat. But now old man Biff is in the driver's seat. And he tells younger Biff to get in the car, butthead. And he proceeds to drive back to Grandma's house, running over the shrubs. And then let's listen to older Biff explaining the almanac.
It cost me $300! Would you shut up about the car?
Hey, and another thing, how do you know where I live?
Let's just say we're related, Biff. And that being the case, I got a little present for you. Something that'll make you rich. You want to be rich, don't you?
Oh, yeah, sure, right. That's rich. You're gonna make me rich?
You see this book? This book tells the future. Tells the result of every major sports event till the end of the century. Football, baseball, horse races, boxing. The information in here is worth millions. And I'm giving it to you.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you very much. Now, why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
It's leave, you idiot. Make like a tree and leave. You sound like a damn fool when you say it wrong.
All right, then leave and take your book with you.
Don't you get it? You could make a fortune with this book. Let me show you.
Line, UCLA trails 17-16. It's 4th and 11 with only 18 seconds left in this game. I'd say it's all over for UCLA.
Bet you $1 million UCLA wins at 19-17.
What are you, deaf, old man? He just said it was over. You lost.
Oh, yeah?
Here comes Decker with a kick. It's up. It looks good, folks. It looks very good. Field goal. UCLA wins 19-17. Listen to that Coliseum crowd go wild.
All right, Pops, what's the gag? How did you know what the score was going to be?
I told you, it's in this book. All you got to do is bet on the winner and you'll never lose.
JD, what do you think of this scene?
So this is a really cool scene. I think that like it gives dividends and pays off with the fact that we know that the almanac's been stolen. We know it's been brought to the past. And he proves to his prior self it's worth a damn that like because you want to know like would you put yourself in that car, in that scene, in that situation, would you believe yourself if you told yourself like, hey, I got you, dog, let's make some money?
Right. No, I definitely wouldn't. I'd be like, what is this old man talking about? The scene ends with older Biff telling him to get a safe and make sure that he guards it, and then giving him the warning about Doc and Marty, which we heard about in the casino. And then Marty radios into Doc after Biff closes the garage door and tells him what's going on. And now the problem is he's stuck in the garage. He can't get out of this thing. And Doc's like, oh, you're going to have to wait for me to come. And he's going to have to bicycle all the way over there. So we cut to later in the night and Biff is about to go to prom. And he finally pulls out, and as he's pulling out, Doc is driving by on his bike, only to find an empty garage because Marty is in the back of the car again. So he radios over to Marty and warns him to be careful about running into his old self. And as he's telling him that, as he's talking about warning Marty about running into his old self, the other Doc, alternate Doc, is now there preparing the electric cable for what's going to happen later in the night when he's going to send Marty back to 1985. So it's all a little confusing. There's a lot of moving pieces here, but what do you think about this as we kind of head into the prom scene here?
It really is confusing with all the moving pieces where you think that you've got a hand on one part of like the scene, and then there's multiple Dr. Browns, and then there's multiple Marty J. Fox. It's confusing, but in a good way, because I feel like this is a great representation of what time travel would probably be like.
In this next scene, Biff is met by Strickland, who takes the almanac from him and then calls him a slacker. And then Marty follows Strickland back to the office, trying to chase it down. And as he chases Strickland, he has to pass himself and Lorraine in the car. So he's got to duck down and kind of crawl past them as they wait for George to come save the day. And then Strickland goes into his office, pours himself a nice hard drink into his coffee mug. And then Marty kind of sneaks into the room and he's about to grab the almanac when the door shuts behind him, and that alerts Strickland. So he's got to dive underneath the desk. And then again, he tries to reach for the almanac, but this time Strickland, who is looking out the window, sits back in his chair and just squashes his hand. And Marty's just writhing in pain. And then finally Strickland leaves and he takes the book with him. Marty has to radio to Doc. He's like, I don't know where Biff's at this exact time. I don't know what to do. And then he hears something in the parking lot and he's like, of course, it's Biff and George. And then we see George knock him out with that big left hook. And then current Marty waits for the smoke to clear, and then he runs over, grabs the almanac, and when Biff starts to come to, Marty knocks him out again. So, JD, what'd you think of this scene?
It's a fantastic scene. I love the way that it's set up, especially with, everything that he goes through and the dramatic irony about him trying to get the almanac and getting his fingers just smashed, and just he gets close and then he gets pulled further away, and he's close, he's further away, and then the way that it ties it into the first movie with the scenes, I don't know, I love it. I didn't realize how much I loved this scene until I rewatched it.
Yeah, I love it as well. We cut to prom, and Marvin Berry's on stage singing Earth Angel with the other Marty playing guitar. And then Marty is about to play an oldie. Well, an oldie where he's from. And he starts riffing Johnny Be Good. And then Marty's radioing back to Doc. And he's like, we got an issue. The Biff's guys, they followed me back into the dance and they're about to jump me. And Doc's like, well, get out of there. He's like, no, not me, the other me. And he's like, oh, that would be terrible. You got to stop it. So we see the guys are on the side of the stage. And Marty's doing this thing on stage, and then the other Marty is now on the other side of the stage looking at the goons from across the way, and he sees that there's some sandbags over their heads, so he climbs up the ladder, and he's about to drop some sandbags on top of these doofuses, and he finally gets over there, and right as Marty's getting deep into this solo and ruining the song and kicking over the amplifier, the bags come crashing down on top of all three of these guys. Marty swings down the safety and exits. As he goes out the back door, we see Lorraine and George talking to the other Marty, and then Biff shows up and says they're going to have it out. But Marty walks away, and when Biff calls him a chicken, he turns to confront him, but gets knocked out by the other version of Marty with the door, and then Biff takes the almanac and then kicks him for good measure. JD, what'd you think of this scene?
How cool is it that the past, the present, the future, what could be, what isn't, sort of comes together and accumulates into one scene where, like, you get to see. I can't put my finger on how neat it is that the door hits him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Like, it's just from like a logistical time travel standpoint, it's like, you think of the whole axiom of if you step on a mosquito in the past, it's going to cause a ripple effect that'll trigger global warming 3,000 years earlier.
Yeah, very true.
And here we are, just a boom, a door to the face.
So Doc and Marty are now hovering above Biff's car, and Marty opens up the door, and they hover above, and then they have to lower down behind him. And Marty opens up the door and steps onto the hoverboard, and he makes his way to the back of Biff's car, and then Doc kind of flies back up, so he gets out of Biff's car line sight. He's not in his rearview mirror anymore. And then Marty's about to grab the almanac here when Biff reaches back and grabs it, and he starts looking at it because the radio's telling him scores and stuff from the day. And then he puts it back on the seat, and then Marty opens up the door real quietly, and he's about to grab the book when Biff finally sees him, and they start fighting for the book. It ends up on the windshield, and Biff tries to throw Marty by just swerving from side to side, and they're fast approaching this tunnel here. So Biff tries to ram him, but Marty quickly just floats to the back of the car and hangs onto the bumper, and Biff thinks he's lost him, but Marty's, again, maneuvers to start grabbing the book, and this time he catches a nice elbow to the face from Biff, but he's able to get to the front, grab the book, and kind of float over the top of the car, which turns Biff, and they're at the end of the tunnel here, so Biff just turns around real quick, kind of does a 360, and Marty starts kicking to get to the other side of the tunnel as fast as he can. Biff just starts revving the engine up, and then he takes off. He catches up to Marty quickly, and they're right at the end of the tunnel. He's about to get nailed when Doc lowers down a safety rope for Marty, who grabs hold of it, gets lifted straight in the air, and Biff can only watch as Marty sails above the car. And then when he turns back to the road, he yells, "Shit!" and he crashes into manure again. And then he says, "I hate manure." JD, what'd you think of this scene?
I hate manure as well. It smells bad, and I love that they bring the whole shit truck back in full circle. Like, it's just so worth it. It's like everything that they did in the first movie was setting up a joke, and now we get to see the punchline of the jokes.
We cut to Marty, and he's now burning the book in a can, making sure nothing ever bad happens to it again. And then Marty pulls out Biff's casino matchbook, and the matchbook turns from casino to auto detailing. And then he pulls out the newspaper article from his dead father, and that turns from shot dead to receives an award. So all things are turning up aces here for Marty and the family. So he radios to Doc. He's like, "Everything's okay now." And Doc tells him that's the ripple effect. And Doc is almost struck by lightning here. He's like, "Whew, that was a close one." And then Marty's like, "Doc, you better be careful. You don't want to get struck by lightning." And Doc is struck by lightning and disappears in the thin air. Marty loses radio with him. So the rain starts pouring down real heavy here, and Marty's just like trying to think of what to do. And then a car pulls up. Let's listen to another clip here.
Mr. McFly!
Huh?
Is your name Marty McFly?
Yeah?
I've got something for you. A letter.
A letter from me? That's impossible. Who the hell are you?
Western Union. Actually, a bunch of us at the office were kind of hoping maybe you could shed some light on the subject. So we've had that envelope in our possession for the past 70 years. It was given to us with the explicit instruction that it be delivered to a young man with your description, answering to the name of Marty, at this exact location, at this exact minute, November 12th, 1955. We had a little bet going as to whether this Marty would actually be here. Looks like I lost.
Did you say 70 years?
Yeah, 70 years, 2 months, 12 days to be exact. Here, sign on line 6, please. Here you are.
Doc! Dear Marty, if my calculations are correct, you will receive this letter immediately after you saw the DeLorean struck by lightning. First, let me assure you that I'm alive and well. I've been living happily these past 8 months in the year 1885. The lightning bolt... 1885! September 1885!
Wait, kid! Wait a minute! What's this all about?
He's alive! The Doc's alive! He's in the Old West, but he's alive!
Yeah, but kid, you all right? You need any help?
There's only one man who can help me.
JD, what'd you think of this scene?
So much drama and so much like just off the wall, and then we get this rainy scene with this mysterious car that pulls up. Who is dude in the car?
If you remember a little movie called Detroit Rock City, he's one of the fathers that they take the drummer to.
Oh, no
Remember?
way.
Yeah, the pizza guy. He takes the money and then they get him high and put shrooms on his pizza.
Oh, of course. That's a typical
Love that scene.
pizza delivery.
Yeah, too. Yeah, I thought this was cool that, Doc sends this letter from the 1800s and this guy's like, well, we didn't think somebody would actually be here. This is kind of cool. I guess I lost a bet. It's kind of neat. And then we cut to the scene, which is basically the ending of part 1 here, where they send Marty back to 1985, and when the time machine disappears into thin air is where we pick back up. So Doc is celebrating, and as he does, Marty comes running around the corner, and he tells Doc to relax, and he tells Doc that he's from the future, and Doc's like, it can't be, I sent you back to the future, and he's like, that's right, I am back from the future, and then Doc just says, great Scott, and he passes out on the ground, and then we get the title screen coming up that says, to be concluded. And we have a quick preview of part 3. Now, I don't know if this actually played in the theaters like this, but I didn't really like it in this part because I feel like it literally gives away everything about part 3. What do you think of the ending of part 2 here? We'll start with Doc just passing out, and then if you want to comment on the part 3 little featurette here.
No, I'm with you on the DVD to see this part 3 alluded to. It just because it creates a division between 55, 85, and 2015, and now we're going back 70 years.
Right.
And it's
long time.
The juice is worth the squeeze in the long term, but without seeing it, very, 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 very.
Yeah, I assume this was something they did maybe just on the VHS at the time. I can't imagine that they put this in theaters like that, because I would watch that and go, okay, I think I got it all. I don't think I even need to go see the next one, because it literally previews like everything that happens. It's
right,
crazy.
And the third movie is probably third place in the franchise.
Yeah, I would say so.
So,
I mean, the movie's going to turn 30 years old, man. How do you think Back to the Future Part 2 has held up all these years?
For me, I definitely think that you can't have Part 2 without Part 1, and you can't have Part 1 without Part 2.
Right.
So it's not so much how does Part 2 hold up after 30 years, but how does the Back to the Future franchise really hold its water? And to anybody that's either listening that has watched Part 1 and not Part 2, has never seen this film or the franchise, do yourself a favor and do a back-to-back marathon with both these movies, because I really feel that that is how they're meant to be watched.
Okay, I agree. And one of the things that I love about Part 2 is I feel like every time I watch this movie, I'm finding new things that I love about it. Just little things like, mentioning the scene with Doc and his room is lit by candles. Like, just stuff that I didn't notice the first time around that I love watching it again and breaking it down.
And that's exactly what I mean. Like, the same way that Infinity War and Endgame are 6 hours of film, but kind of the same movie back to back. I really feel like they in Endgame they took so many nods, and they even acknowledged Back to the Future in the film.
So next, we're going to be back with 2 new episodes next week, and we have an interview with Adam Contrast. He's the director and star of a documentary called The Fastest DeLorean in the World, which you can watch right now on Amazon Prime. And the sequel is about to hit Prime in the coming weeks here in June. It's a really fun interview. JD, what do you want to kind of tease about our Adam Contrast interview?
If you are a fan of Back to the Future, California, Cars, Back to the Future, this is definitely the interview for you. This guy is effing fantastic. He gives such a great picture of what it is to just drive balls to the wall in the DeLorean, which I think we all want to do, right? Like,
yeah.
Is that not a bucket list thing for everyone?
If I fit in the thing, yeah, absolutely. Wow. Be awesome. Such a tiny car, though.
That's what she said.
Gosh, I don't think I got into this in the in that interview with him, but I don't think I ever told you this either. I almost owned a DeLorean. My aunt, who passed away, on her deathbed, she gave me her DeLorean, which was her dad's car. And then when she passed away, unfortunately, my uncle said, too bad. He sold the car for like $5,000. And it's worth like 30-40 grand now if you get it fixed up. So that's a little bit of a bummer. I don't think I would have been able to ever fix it. It had major electrical issues, but I was that close to owning a DeLorean. Like, it was mine, and then it got taken away. So
knees to nuts.
Kind of a bummer. And then we also have a really fun interview where we are going to finally get to the episode you guys voted for us to do next, which is our top 5 movie soundtracks. And that's going to be a lot of fun. We had Anna on again, who joined us for Phantom Menace. So look out for those 2 episodes next week. Again, thank you guys so much for 100 episodes. Here's to another 100 and a lot more to follow. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, CastBox, and YouTube. You can follow us on social media at backintimepod. I'm at KAutry29. JD is at Unjust Justin. But for now, it's time to get back into the DeLorean, punch in today's date, and return back to present day. Thanks for listening. See ya, buttheads.
Happy 100. Thank you all. You rock.